Robichaud from the University of Sherbrooke, on Marronnage in the Atlantic world, and Kyle Prochnow from York University, speaking about the West India Regiments in the digital age, building the database of enslaved and free African soldiers. And finally, Coen van Galen from Radboud University, crazy small. The Slave Regiments of Suriname, day-to-day records of enslaved population from Suriname from 1830 to 1863. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'll try to keep track of which language I'm speaking in this time. Just let me know, remind me if I switch into French. We've seen some very incredible projects, and I'll be presenting one which began as a project on the French Atlantic, which explains why I'm in this session, but then it has expanded over time. Jean-Pierre Le Glonec, my colleague who began this project, are very pleased to take advantage of this event to reveal the long-awaited new version of the Marronnage website. The project was initiated by Jean-Pierre, who many of you know. He apologizes for not being with us. He is enjoying warmer temperatures in Melbourne, Australia right now. 10 years ago, Jean-Pierre asked me to collaborate with him on this project because I had worked on court cases involving slavery in New France, and I also have a long experience in digital history with projects such as this one, which is just eye candy for the timekeeper. Georeference archaeological data. I do not need to go over the importance of these types of documents that we'll be presenting, given that we have heard several presentations on the topic earlier. As with other projects, we wish to give back a voice to enslaved people, even though we are using a source carrying the discourse of slavery. When we read between the lines of these short advertisements, we can bring attention to gestures of defiance, of resistance, and of attempts to regain autonomy and agency in the face of oppression. The Marronnage in the Atlantic world began as a project of the French Atlantic History Group and was launched in the fall of 2009. It was originally focused on a colony for which the ads and prison lists were not easily accessible, which is Saint-Domingue. Over the past 9.5 years, this corpus has been used by many researchers and educators. In Google Scholar, you can find 25 publications which refer to this project. Marcel Dorigny has used it in his Les Abolitions de l'Esclavage, and you will find references in articles published in the William and Mary Quarterly, the Annales de Démographie Historique, and the Journal for Maritime Research. Thanks to our collaboration with Paul Lovejoy's SHAD project, we were able to expand it to include other French colonies, Guadeloupe and French Guiana, American territories, South Carolina and Louisiana, and British colonies, Jamaica and Lower Canada. The oldest document dates from 1765. The most recent was published in 1833. We're also able to simplify the interface and make it as accessible and intuitive as possible in the version that I will be presenting to you today. The interface is currently in French, translation is in progress, and the documents are in their original language. Just making sure I'm looking at the right screen. This is a summary of the content that you have here, as well as the locations from which the documents are taken from. I will not read these numbers. Almost all the advertisements have been transcribed, except for 202. We'll get to them. And we have transcribed a 10% sample of the prison list. The transcriptions are in the original language of publication, French or English. All digitized images are available for prison lists, while 71% of the advertisements are available in image format. About 75% of the documents were also summarily analyzed to extract information about the individuals, such as their name and their gender. There's more than 500,000 words transcribed, of which 494,000 are significant words, which provides a rich corpus on the daily discourse regarding slaves and slavery. To give you another broad context, this is the distribution by region, the number of newspapers, and the number of advertisements and prison lists for each location, distribution men and women, and also, if you really care, the relational model, which I won't go into much detail. Let's switch rather to the actual search interface. And we've used Ajax to make it as interactive as possible. And all documents are available either as transcriptions or in the document's original language, or as digitized image, or both. And you can search for a keyword, and we have talked a lot about MAC today. And in this case, we will have 1,125 documents, which has the word MAC. And you could also search by name. You can combine these but if you search for a name, we have a type ahead search. So if you look for a book, you will find an individual named Bookman. And here we have a case where we have trois nègres nommés Bookman, chasseurs, Jean-Jacques Créole Cocher, sans étampe, David Étampé, nègre de Guinée. The deux premiers, the first two, Bookman and Jean-Jacques, two subjects of the most dangerous type who it is important to arrest. And then you have the description. The second one, escape with a nabo with a chain, thumb pincers. And so you could here get a sense of not only the impact of slavery on people, but also the efforts required to escape from it. You can also filter whether you want us by gender. So we have 3,625 on women. And also when you look at colonies, you can look at, for example, Louisiana. And then when you select a colony or a state, you actually have that list of newspapers for that specific state. So basically it filters down in this case. I'm always curious about newspapers named L'Ami des Lois. At least they're obvious about it. There's a newspaper in Lower Canada called L'Ami du Peuple, but really the subtitle is L'Ami du Peuple, friend of the people, but the subtitle is of law and order. So you see that it's really not necessarily the people. Since we have two types of documents, the annonce de fuite and the prison list, you can actually select either of those. And we also have this little timeline that you can restrict the time period that you're studying through this tool to be able to get, in this case, from 1782 to 1802. There's currently an annoying effect in Safari that we're trying to sort out, an annoying CSS effect. It works best, obviously, in Chrome and Firefox, probably even in Edge, but I would have to work more often on a Windows computer to find out. I'm normally in Linux. If we go back to the methodology, and we skip after this, the ads from Louisiana, Jamaica, and South Carolina were transcribed by Jean-Pierre Leglonec as part of his doctoral research. Others were transcribed by research assistants, and about a quarter have been verified by myself, but my wife got bored of me doing this while we were watching Netflix. So pick up on it at some point. The original spelling has been maintained, but we made adjustments for typography. We did not reproduce the long S, and when letters were reversed or put upside down, as in when brandings are being described, we actually described the branding in between square brackets. Now, where do we go from here? That's always an interesting question. These are the different events and that are involved and the different people involved as well. A grant has been applied for to expand our corpus to include Martinique and to incorporate documents transcribed by a former student for her MA, if we could just import those. We also hope to finish transcribing prison lists so our coverage is uniform. There's obviously the issue of long-term preservation. Now, we have made deliberate choices. At different points in time, we have worked on drilling down slightly to see, well, what could we do in terms of, we've seen examples of storytelling, and we've seen examples where we could look at defining, categorizing the data even more. We found that what we were doing most quickly, given our other obligations, was getting as many of these documents online as possible. So that's what we've, deliberate choice that we've made. Now, in terms of preservation, in French we talk about pérennité, which rhymes with sérénité or serenity. We can only hope that this data can be carried peacefully into the future. Although we're well aware of the challenges that are involved, we need projects such as Enslaved to gather buckets and buckets and buckets of data, and also have a permanent mission of maintaining it. If Matrix is interested in this data, we're certainly open to discussions. Thank you.
Questions? Yes.
Does the search by keyword, mot d'annonce, does that allow you to search by several different keywords, or do you have to choose one at a time?
We've done it. It was one at a time. We could change it so it's several words. It's basically we just have to change the query. But we had started with one word at a time because right now to speed it up, we're using the index of individual words for speed.
I mean, could that be done with a Boolean search, so you could do and/ors?
And/or that would take a little more time, but it's doable. So we'll have a list of things that we'd like to do, and we'll see for the next version how we can incorporate. Because there's different elements like that would just have to apply to it. We've had at one point had to get back from certain types of programming because we had made some funky choices at one point with libraries that were no longer supported, and so we just had to drop some of the functions that we had. So right now obviously Boolean search is very simple, but we're very careful as to which directions we choose, again to assure long-term maintenance of the interface and avoid pitfalls that we had some nice graphs at one point, and those libraries no longer work. So.
Yes.
So are you working entirely with the petite Marronnage, or you deal at all with deal with the larger groups?
This is specifically with Petit Marronnage. Actually, we take, if there are many individuals who have escaped at the same time and they're listed, then we are involving that aspect of Grand Marronnage. But really, this is focused on Petit Marronnage, what is in the newspapers.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, Kyle.
You
Do I
got
need to
it?
put that in my pocket, or can I just
You can leave it there, you just can't run away from it, because we
walk
don't want it
very
to break.
far?
And then,
You know what? I might forget. I will take it. Thank you. All right. Can everyone hear me? Yes. All right. First, I'll thank everyone at Matrix, Walter, Alicia, Dean. Also, thanks to Dave and Liz for organizing, and all the other graduate students who have been milling around doing things for us. So today I'll be talking about a couple of the sources and the information that I'm drawing from those sources that have become central to my dissertation project. The project traces the African origins and the forced migrations of thousands of victims of the transatlantic slave trade who were conscripted into the West India regiments between 1795 and around 1860. It looks at both enslaved Africans purchased in the West Indies by British officers before the end of the British slave trade, and liberated Africans conscripted in Freetown after passing through the vice-admiralty courts or courts of mixed commission as well. So what I'm focusing on today is my use of bureaucratic service records to try and reconstruct the lives of these enslaved African men thrust into the Atlantic world. The project is centered on people, as are the sources and the spreadsheets which I am compiling from those sources. So the core of the project is built on two separate but equally rich source bases. They are muster rolls of individual regiments and discharge packets for individual soldiers. So I'll take the two sources one at a time and explain what they are and what we can do with them. And then I'll take a couple of examples of individual soldiers and talk about what we can learn about them using these sources. So the first collection are the description rolls. They look like this. They are register-style ledger books. Each row is one soldier. The majority of these men were conscripted, purchased in the West Indies directly off of slave vessels between about 1798 and 1808. So looking at the source, kind of reading left to right, we have the company, rank, name, height, age, description, marks, country, the column is called where born, date of conscription, and then various columns on the right side filled out as appropriate: desertion, promotion, discharge, death, and finally remarks. So I've begun transcribing the source in Excel. It's much easier to read this way. And so this is transcription, and I've also added a couple of my own columns. So this is the other half. Imagine we're scrolling right in Excel. But the way that this is laid out, I argue, each individual row contains several important life events, and taken together, they create the rough narrative of a person's life. So, for example, we'll take Thomas Barry, and we know, using this source, quite a bit about this man. He was a private in the 5th Company of the 5th West India Regiment. He has some scarification on his temples, moving across. He is Ibibio from the Bight of Biafra. He was enslaved and carried to the West Indies, probably Jamaica, where the 5th West India Regiment usually made their purchases, arriving in January of 1802, at which point he was purchased by a British officer and conscripted. Moving further to the right, we can see he served over 15 years in the 5th West India Regiment. That includes a brief desertion, followed by a return, and his final discharge in June of 1817, when the entire regiment was demobilized. So we get all of this information just from one row in this ledger book. And so these sources allow us to begin piecing together the lives of hundreds of enslaved Africans conscripted into the West India Regiment. Thank you. So the second collection are the Royal Hospital Chelsea Soldier Service documents. They look like this. This is the front page. It's a packet, so there are several pages to it. And the War Office holds about 1,400 of these packets for West India Regiment soldiers. Most of these individuals are liberated Africans conscripted in Freetown. And these packets, while they look quite a bit different from the conscription rolls, they contain more or less the same information: date and place of conscription, name, of course, a note on country, place or places of service in the West India Regiments, in the West Indies and in West Africa, reason for discharge, there's usually a brief medical report, and often a note on where they're sent after their service is complete. So, for example, and I'm transcribing these into a separate spreadsheet, but one very much modeled off the previous one that I showed. So we'll take an example like we did with the previous one. This man, Lord Arundel, and again, construct a brief narrative of his life. He was a liberated African, conscripted around age 14 in Sierra Leone. During this, in December of 1812, during this time, he would have been carried to Bunce Island, where there was a recruiting depot, trained there, and then placed aboard a transatlantic vessel and carried to the West Indies. We can see he served in the 4th Regiment for 6.5 years, was settled in Sierra Leone in 1819 when his regiment was disbanded, and yet he re-enlisted the following year under unknown circumstances, and served 22 years until his discharge in the Bahamas in the summer of 1842. So again, like the description rolls, we can use these types of documents to begin piecing together a rough life story through major life events and migrations. So the final thing that I'll mention, as I input this information into the spreadsheets, I'm also looking for additional sources on individual soldiers. So for example, this is the discharge packet of Frederick Gibbon, conscripted in Freetown on the 1st of September, 1826. And the reason I highlight this one is because, interestingly, he was also an informant of Sigismund Kulla, and his brief biography was recorded in Kulla's Polyglotta Africana. And so now, with this additional source, we can fill in a lot of those blanks. Let's see, another option that I wanted to highlight is the use of pensioner records. So this is from the description roll, the first source that I showed, and the second entry from the bottom, Samuel Proffers. I highlight this entry because he shows up 2 decades later in the record of military pensioners. This is him at the top here. And this source has him living in British Honduras in 1837, 20 years after his regiment was demobilized. So sources like this allow me to extend the narratives further of many of these soldiers who, after their service was complete. So this is the next step, bringing in other sources that add additional information about individual West India Regiment soldiers. And all of this is to say, I'll reiterate, that there's extensive source material which allows us to reconstruct soldiers' lives, their lives and their transatlantic passages in service to the British Empire. Thanks.
Several hands here. Let's start out with David.
Sorry. Yes.
Have you checked out have you tried to match the enlistment date, enlistment in inverted commas, with arrival of slave vessels?
Yes, I have. I haven't done that very extensively yet, but yes, using the Voyages database and the registers of liberated Africans, I have. It's the date of arrival, and then the ethnonym is also often helpful in trying to match up ships.
I just thought you could have identified maybe half your sample.
Yeah, well, the names don't match because we have Anglophone names in these registers. But yeah, so for in the Freetown registers, sometimes it specifies which regiment, sometimes it. Yeah, go ahead.
But what about the pre-Freetown recruits? What about those bought, purchased in the West Indies? I was thinking you could match the arrival date of the vessel with the enlistment date in Jamaica.
Yes, got it. So I have tried to do that. The reason that I've kind of stopped is because I'm not always certain where conscription occurred. For some of these individuals, I don't know if they were originally conscripted into the 5th Regiment, which was the one that the source that I was looking at, or if they were later transferred. It makes sense that it's possible, but I'm not certain about the location of arrival, certain enough to make judgments on that just yet.
Was there an average age they kind of entered when they became soldiers, and also how many father son pairs had?
Wow, the second one I've never. None off the top of my head that I can say. I don't know about that. Average age. Usually, what is it? They specify they want individuals at least, I think it's 16 years old, but often there are children enlisted as drummers, for example. I've seen boys as young as 7 or 8, but most of these people on enlistment are probably between 18 and 26 or so.
Eve, how much more time do we have? One more question? The number you've asked questions before, I don't think Bruno's...
Very quick, so it's like, what about women? Find any women in these records?
In these records, no, not at all. To get at that, I intend to use the Freetown registers, which do have some women and even girls conscripted, but in these two source bases, no, I don't have any women.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, our third speaker, right with us.
Got it?
Yeah, I hope it works. Does it work? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you all, and thank you for the possibility to present on this wonderful conference. I have only 11 minutes left. I don't know how it can, because I only started. This is the first page of a slave register in Suriname. It's an early one. It's from the 1830s. It shows a man called Johann Matthias Karg, and he buys a mother and 3 children in 1835. Within 2 weeks, he swaps them, as it were, with a mother and 3 children from plantation De Zwarigheid, a coffee plantation. And a year later, he manumitteds this mother and children. This page alone tells you a little bit about the story. When you combine it with, for example, information on plantations, information on manumissions in Suriname, information from Surinamese newspapers, you get the whole story. Karg is actually a director on the plantation De Zwarigheid. He bought the first 4 people with to get the opportunity to buy his own wife and children, Koba and her children, and set them free. Based on the slave registers, we actually also know what happened to the people, Antoinetta and her children, who became part of the plantation De Zwarigheid. And they were only set free in 1863. So almost 30 years later. Why am I telling this? Because actually I'm working on a project which is called the Historical Database of Suriname. And the aim of this project is actually to create a database of a part of the Surinamese population between 1830 and 1950, so a long stretch, based on life courses. We try to find out what happens to people. And because of the quality of the population source in Suriname, we are able to follow people through time in slavery and after slavery. But we want to do more. We also want to make what I call transcription data sets for use by the public. So we also publish the data set of the slave registers for public use, for historical and family search. And we are heavily involved at the moment in preservation of population records, because 200 years in the tropics does something to paper. And it's not good, I can tell you that. We're working together with we are the Radboud University in Nijmegen, the Netherlands, and the University of Suriname. And we're working together with the National Archives of Suriname and the Netherlands on this. And the first campaign we did was the campaign Make the Surinamese Slave Registers Public, which was a combined crowdfunding and citizen science project, and which was really successful. Within half a year, we not only raised the money, but we also transcribed all the slave registers of Suriname. I'm publishing an article on how to work with audiences in crowdsourcing projects, which will be published this year in Historical Methods. Suriname is in South America. It was a typical, Caribbean-style plantation colony, although it was on the mainland of South America. And at least 210,000 people were brought from Africa to Suriname in between 1650 and more or less 1822, when the last illegal transport were brought to Suriname. In 1808, transatlantic slave trade was forbidden. And in 1835, 46,000 enslaved persons, somewhat more than 5,000 free black and colored persons, and some 6,000 Maroons, we don't know for sure, lived in Suriname, and they were the descendants of those more than 200,000 people who were brought to Suriname. So slavery is a slaughter for people, and it's really visible here. Slavery was finally abolished in Suriname on July the 1st, 1863, when 35,000 people in Suriname were freed. What are those slave registers? Well, they're not like the British slave registers. They're not a sort of census of people in slavery, which was made once or twice after a few years. It was a continuous registration of everyone who lived in slavery. From 1826 onwards, but the oldest registers did not survive. The oldest which survive are from 1830. And they have a sort of split between what they call private slave owners and plantations, because in Suriname, people living on plantations were seen as part of the plantations. They could not be bought and sold separately from the plantation, only with the permission of the government. While people in the hands of private slave owners could be bought and sold freely. There are 4 series of those registers. Because of the continuous registration, you have to, well, renew the books after a few years, because people are bought, people are sold, people die, people are born. And 4 series are still in existence, starting in 1830, 1838, 1848, and 1851. And, well, they're not all really complete. The oldest series especially is more than half of it is lost. But on average, 2/3 of the slave registers have survived. And especially the last series, 1851 until 1863, is more or less complete. In total, more than 163,000 individual records survive, and an estimated 60,000 people, because you will understand that somebody who is alive in 1830 will be mentioned in 1838, in 1848, and 1851. And because we have more series, this is actually helpful, because if some series are missing, you can follow those people later on in later series. And what I didn't realize when we started with this project actually, was that it also gives a lot of information about those 400 plantations and more than 4,000 private slave owners who lived in Suriname or who lived in the Netherlands but had possessions in Suriname, or lived in England or lived elsewhere. We realized early on that quite a lot of people, quite a number of people actually mentioned in the information on the British slave trades on the website. And now I'm nervous. I now can't remember the name of the website. I'm so sorry. Your website.
Legacies of British Slave.
I'm so sorry. Legacies of British Slave. So, because quite a number of people actually moved from Berbice or other parts, Guyana, or from Barbados to Suriname, both after the end of slavery in the British colonies, because they had a lot of money ready, and they bought plantations in Suriname. The biggest slave owner, private slave owner in Suriname in 1863 is actually a Scotsman called Hugh Wright. But also people who came in the 1820s to avoid the end of slavery. And I'm actually working on a piece now, together with some students, to find people who lived enslaved in Berbice, but stayed enslaved in Suriname until 1863. So make those people visible again. It's also, this project also is about making individuals visible again. Well, this is an example of the slave registers, the last series of slave registers. And this is more or less an explanation of a sort of information which is offered here. It's a combination of a list at one side and a sort of, continuous registration at the other side, in which people can be added to this list, but also could be removed either because they die or because they have been sold or otherwise. This, of course, made a problem for us because we tried to involve all this information, but we could not, got a good grip on this continuous process. It's not a list only. A part of it is already published. This is what I call the transcription database, which is for the main published. This is the registers of the 1851 to 1863 series. And for example, the girl you see is Affie, and she's mentioned in the registers. And she's mentioned twice because for every register in which a person is mentioned, we mention both the starting dates, the date in which they start to appear in this record, and the date they are written off this record. In this case, Affie is sold when she was 2 years old. And we also offer within the database the original documents. And you can even download the whole database yourself, because we don't want to keep it for ourselves. And I see him already over time now, but only 1 minute, and not.
You have 1 minute 53 seconds left.
Oh, wow, that's a sea of time. This is our the focus of our project. We want to include not only the slave registers, but also the registers of manumission and emancipation in 1863, because people get new names when they're emancipated. They get a surname and sometimes new first names. We also want to include the civic records, because we want to have the interaction between free people and enslaved people. And we want to follow it up through the generations. For two main reasons. One, because a new type of, I may call it slavery, evolves in Suriname, which is called indentured labor. And a lot of people from China, from India, from Indonesia come to Suriname to work there. And, well, most of them stay in Suriname. But also because we want to know what exactly slavery does to the generations after the end of slavery. Slavery has a long tail, and we want to research it. And we already did, in a small part, for a few plantations, and you got remarkable outcomes, both about, well, the growth of fertility. There's people starting to get more children after slavery, but also people start to die far often after the end of slavery. And you can imagine, because people were not accustomed to live as free people yet, they had to learn it. So there's a sort of dip directly after slavery. If you want to learn more about the Slave Registers of Suriname and also the possibilities to use it for research, please download my article that I wrote with my colleague Maurits Hassenkamp in History of the Family. I've put it on my ResearchGate and academia pages. And one of the reasons I'm here is that I would try to find people who are interested also in working together and creating new projects together. So I'm very happy to share this all with you. Thank you. And I'm 22 seconds late, and I started.
You're fine.
Okay.
Questions? Yes.
My question, I hope, is food for thought on the issue of indentured. And you mentioned that the Chinese came to Suriname. And my understanding of the importation, literally importation of Chinese to the Caribbean specifically at the close of the slave trade, that it was not necessarily a volunteer coming. And you're right, and this I want to support as you explore more. The whole idea of indenturedness, even though it began earlier, becomes an extension of enslavement. The best case, the United States does a very good job of extending that enslavement. They don't even call it indentured, but indenturedness could be that midway point. So as you're thinking about that, I would offer those two comments as food for thought.
Thank you very much. I totally agree with you. If I said they came to Suriname, I mean they were brought to Suriname. That you're totally right on that. Thank you very much.
Henry.
Yeah, wonderful presentation. I'm wondering if there's any ethnographic data in the registers, not only from Africa, but perhaps from the Serena, Juka, and other marine communities. And then I also would like to know if you see any evidence of people who, after freedom, moved into the maroon communities at all? Is there any?
To answer the question, there's no direct connection between slave voyages and slave registers, because the registers were originally intended to stop illegal trafficking of people into Suriname. So they're not mentioned. There are no ships mentioned or something like that. And for some strange reason, but I never have really fathomed, they didn't never put in. They never put in any information, for example, about skin color or something like that. It's only names, it's birth date, it's the name of the mother, which is very relevant because you can reconstruct family lines, but only through the female line, because people in slavery did not have a father, according to Surinamese law. And you have to bring in other sources as well. And we see this, I'm going the wrong way. This project as a sort of framework on which you can add all types of information. The strength of the slave register is actually that everyone is mentioned in it. So you have everyone with a name of an owner, with a birth date, often with the name of the mother, and you can combine it with other types of sources, which makes it a very rich basis to expand on. But you have to use other sources. We also work with church records, for example, to add extra information on this. And of course, plantation.
Do those church records provide information on paternity?
Quite often, yes. But especially which is called the Moravian Brethren, which is a Protestant missionary society which works in Suriname. They quite often also offer information about unofficial marriages, etc. So that's a really interesting source to use.
Are there any African names too?
Well, there are, because I will present another conference on resistance within the slave records. And what's actually happened is, well, people only get a name from the owner have given them. But when people are known by another name, they have to register this other name as well. And here you can really see by some plantations that especially women tend to think, well, I am no Wilhelmina, I have a totally other name, and they register those other names. This is very interesting. Other questions?
All right. Yes. Last question. Yes.
Why are some of the names crossed out?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, because of this continuation of the process, it's actually a sort of bookkeeping. If somebody has been sold to somebody else, the name is crossed out because it has been written over to the name of the other person. But also, on the same page, it mentions who this person is, where they've been sold to. So you can follow people through time, through the books. And of course, if they die, the names are also crossed out, of course.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, we have another 10-minute break.
And then next people come up to the podium.
Yeah, 10-minute break for those of you who are presenting next.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Stuff ready?
Was it understandable?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Seemed
I'm
to be
always
well received.
afraid about speaking with my thick Dutch accent.
That was just excellent.
No, that was wonderful. I have some questions for you.
I sent an email today to the organization with my what I have this year.
Yeah, you're better off with that, Bruno.
Mandou sua apresentação?
PowerPoint. No. Yeah.
I'm going next, and I needed to get into Google.
Sou o segundo, né? Apareceram.
Okay, we can try that.
Só três.
I don't need this anymore, do I?
O meu deu 11,59. Certinho. Mas eu acho que eu vou tirar um pouco de uma coisa que eu mencionei no Object Spreadsheet, porque não é tão importante.
Não tem ideia onde é que vai dar um
Qualquer coisa eu vou apontar um pouco dele, tá?
Ah, ok.
Assim, no caso de
Mas não é disso.
Não.
Essa questão é complexa. Eu vejo o apoio da responsabilidade.
Sim.
Você responde até onde você conseguir.
E no começo eu vou falar também sobre a graduação.
Não, isso é assistente. It's okay?
We'll get it. How about you?
Question, yeah, like my presentation's already there, but
Is it under your name?
yes, Cruz. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw it like when I would see it over here. The thing is, I'm opening also the website, and I've seen people like trying to open the website and then the page wouldn't pop up for some reason. So is it because they were using an HDMI cable, or?
Yeah, it's usually because they're using a laptop and they're trying to transition between the two. So if you're doing it on, you should probably.
So I can tell you the story if you actually care about how the
She does
technology
that.
works. Okay.
Partially.
If you bring your own laptop and you use 100% on PowerPoint, it goes into the presentation level, which means you can see the laptop screen, so the audience cannot, and whatever's on the main video output shows then. However, if you try and load a web page,
page, what will happen is you'll open the web page up, like a lot of times,
It's going to be here,
but it'll never be up there. Because the presentation
Did you pull it off of your drive and locally in case we lose the connection?
Are we going to lose the connection? Is that a possibility?
Well, it's always a possibility, right?
Or what should I do? I wanted to work here, but
I would just go ahead and download it. So if you go to File and Download As, and then whatever it is.
And where is it now? Here. Okay.
Yes.
All right. That's cutting out some of the screen.
What?
I need to see more of the screen. This isn't showing enough.
I don't know if you can do full screen in a Word in a Google Doc. Do you?
I've done it before. I've shown more than
Okay,
this.
hold on. Let's open it as the doc. Here, allow me.
Thank you, yeah.
Coincidentally, I was talking to Ismael Montana today.
Oh,
It's in my cards.
okay.
I am not a historian, I am a scientist.
Is that better? Maybe we can go to single screen.
Here, let me.
I am an expert in one section of this, and basically I have threatened repeatedly if we need a
Can you take me back to where it just where you did something called?
Thank you.
All I did was open it.
How this thing works is actually a history lesson in and of itself, because it turns out the most advanced video interface we have today is in
So here it is in your Google Doc.
What happened to the downloaded version? Is it gone?
No. Let's find it. I think if you click here.
Here?
Yeah, you can go to your downloads. Here.
That's exactly how this
Okay.
And then it's right there.
Okay, I do want to delete all this when we're done.
The new thing emulates the old thing and not actually better, just faster.
And then if you go to view, are there other options that you're looking for?
Nope, this is what I want right here.
Okay. I have to load a couple more for after you, and then I'll mic you and we'll get set up.
While we're doing the questions and answers, can we keep this up so that Bruno's not loading and...
Yeah, no, I haven't been loading anyone until you're completely done.
There's a whole science calculus which stats on top of it.
Okay, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it...
Camera systems, they have an entire different set of things on camera systems. Mars rover, which all of the images you see are actually artificially colored based on an algorithm, based on guesses about what your vision system will look like, because none of the systems on Mars actually have a vision system.
Well, what are those like? Are they like?
So they have
Like I don't
it's a
know.
black and white camera with a selective filter on the front. So the images are static and they shoot one photo.
Yeah, I don't know where Bruno went. They're with my sister now.
Based on what you think, the average
She ate all the cookies you gave her.
so the chain goes wider
Cruz.
That's so interesting. Just because you never think about cameras that are outside of the studio.
there's a lot of interesting presentations.
I'm happy. I'm definitely interested in optics because of all my filmmaking. It's something I'm very.
I highly recommend the article someone wrote about a decade ago about the Marshall camera systems because
There you are. No, I wanted to confirm that it's this one. Okay.
Yeah, what information
I didn't want to
you get
assume.
with that camera, right? For sure. Yeah.
I got yours.
You got mine?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I picked this one. It just looks like a duplication.
Okay. Can you just like, if you can, like, just open it really quickly? I just want to see if there's like a weird animation on one.
It's here.
Just here. Just want to see how it works. Okay. Cool.
Good.
Yeah, so then I click again and this show up. Yep, thank you.
Just to check if mine is working well. Sorry, no penises.
Oh, don't get me into that, please.
We had a faculty member get fired for having pornography on his computer.
I remember the
It's a light pornography. It's okay, just the dashes in.
Freedom narrative is not safe for women.
MSU.
It's not safe for schools, that's for sure, under elementary education, high school education. Okay.
Did you find mine? MSU?
There you are. Good. Okay, and then I'm going to eject your thing.
So many
Eject. He's right there. Calm down.
Daryl!
We don't want you to forget.
I always do that.
Okay, and now
Good. Happy.
ooh, yes, we are fine. I have to mic our first. And so this looks good, right? Yes.
Okay. He's going to be passing this thing, so why do some introductions? I'm the introductions first.
All right, okay, thank you.
Second. All right, here we go again. One more time. We're going to have the last two sessions, we're going to put them together. So it's Jorge and Bethany. I want to know Jorge and Bethany. I saw Jorge earlier. Jorge and Bethany. Who's Bethany? I don't know Bethany. Yeah. Here? Hi. Oh, hi, Bethany. Hi. So you'll be at the end as well. We're gonna put these two panels together. So we're gonna start out with Aaron Fogleman from Northern Illinois University and Keith Arbour from Cambridge, speaking about a catalog of published narratives by African men and women enslaved in the transatlantic trade, 1586 to 1937, followed by Bruno Veras from York, Baquaqua, Transatlantic Biography, the Digital Initiative, then Luisa, also from York, Freedom Narratives, Testimonies of West Africans on the era of slavery. Then together, Jorge Felipe from Michigan State, reassessing the slave trade in Cuba, 1790 to 1820. And then Bethany Wade from the University of Pittsburgh, representing the dead, that records the trade left behind. So we will start out with Aaron, who will be joined by Keith. Is that correct? Oh, we've switched around.
No,
You're still okay. Okay.
Are you wired? Are you wired? Yeah.
You hear me okay? Great. Thanks for having us. It's great to be here. And I want to give you a little background here. I'm Aaron Fogleman. I'm an early Americanist. I'm also an Atlanticist. I teach and write about the history of the Atlantic world, which I define as the world made by encounters among Africans, Native Americans, and Europeans, wherever they occurred, anywhere on the four continents or the ocean in between. Keith is also an early Americanist, and he's a professional bibliographer. We'll see why that's important in a moment. Our project is to collect as many life stories or narratives that we can find that are published of people born in Africa and taken into the transatlantic slave trade. The plan is to publish a cloth edition first, and that could be coming out next year. That's being a little optimistic with that.
It's very optimistic.
And, but optimism is good. And we'll follow that with online digitization, and we hope to connect with the Matrix and other projects that so many of you are working on. That's our long-range goal. And Keith has distributed a one-page handout of our project. So there's nothing to look at now. This is all tentative and preliminary, but that's where we're going. The criterion for inclusion in this catalog, and I'm going to give you the simple view here, because this is very complex and nuanced. But we're looking for people who were born in Africa. They were caught in the transatlantic slave trade, and they produced some kind of narrative about some part of their life that has been published. If we find that, then it goes into our catalog. Most of these narratives that we're finding are about freedom won and lost during the age of revolution and the age of emancipation, but not all of them. There are many other kinds of examples. We're concentrating on highlighting them all in one place for research and pedagogical purposes. And when we get to the online version, you will have a link to the full text of each narrative. We will give a detailed publication history of each narrative, and the idea is that knowledge of supply and demand for distinct texts across time and space will be fundamental to understanding the impact of these published narratives. So just a couple of statistics to give you an idea. Most people believe there are probably less than 20 such narratives in the Atlantic world. But in fact, we found 245. 57 of these are produced in a non-English language, that's 23%. 36 were by women, that's 15%, and 33 by children, meaning they were a child at the time of enslavement, in the Middle Passage. They give the narrative when they're grown up. As far as chronology and languages of the narratives go, until 1734, they're all in Spanish. From 1734 to the 1830s, they're overwhelmingly British. And from the 1830s to the 1870s, the British and U.S. narratives predominate. And from the 1870s to the end, it's entirely U.S. Places of publication, London is by far has the most, then New York, Paris, Boston, Philadelphia, and D.C. So today we're introducing you to the project. We want to learn from your work and perspectives, and also looking for input from you or things that we might have missed. So especially in your work, if it's something fairly obscure that you think meets these criteria, if you would email us, we would greatly appreciate that. Okay, so we need to finish the edition histories we're working on. We want to, wanted to do the examples. Can you go to the first one? The first one, 1586, this is Ilesca, a Maroon leader in Ecuador. And you get the name first, if you have it, the African name first, followed by any other names, a paragraph, short, sometimes longer than that, describing their biography briefly, and then all of the additions. And could you go to Phyllis Wheatley now, 1773. This will be an extensive one. And let me just make one point about Wheatley. It shows you, I think, in part the usefulness of this for research. She was the first person born in Africa who appropriated Enlightenment or revolutionary ideas to critique transatlantic slavery. This is beginning 1773. We're moving into the age of revolution. A lot of people in the catalog will do it after her, but of her many accomplishments, this is one that I think is very important. If you go through that, she published a lot, and there's many editions, so that gives you an idea of the extent of the publication history. Okay, then can you take us to 1826?
Number?
26. You know, I'm running out of time.
The notion that he'd depend on me for technical assistance is just laughable. 17 when?
Let me just say that we tend to associate this genre with Anglo-British traditions connected to abolitionism, and a lot of it is. But there are other languages, and much of this in the first half of the 19th century was connected to scientific interests. And there's a couple of collections in French from the 1820s and 1850s of geographers and linguists who wanted these people to tell them about the details of their homelands in Africa. And this was published at the time. Last is Sylvia King from 1936. She was part of the WPA narrative project. And the many thousands of narratives, and I think 41 volumes, she is the only one who was born in Africa. And so she's last in our list. So why are we doing this? What does this matter? Why does it matter? We're trying to understand transatlantic slavery, like so many other people, from Africa through the Middle Passage to life in slavery in the Americas and beyond after emancipation. Its impact, the impact of these people and all of these events on the Atlantic world, on Africans and African Americans to this very day. And I think as we do this, we're a lot better off if we look for, find, and listen to African voices to help us understand this. And there's a lot more of them than most people realize. So that's what we're after. So Keith.
While he's doing that, I want to say my wife and I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and we have extra room in the house, so anyone who's doing a project in Boston, Boston Public, Mass Historical Society, Harvard Law School, and you're here today and presenting, you can stay with us for a week or a month. You can email me and say Cambridge Stay in the subject line. I don't read my email, but if it says Cambridge Stay or bibliographical question, I answer those. And if you're coming, we only ask that you be from 250 miles away. If there are 3 people who want to be there for the month of August or something, then the farther away you live, you get priority. So if you're from New York, your chances are less. If you're from New Zealand, then you have to stay with us. And we're very free in any case. And I've been just blown away by the work that I've seen presented today, and I'm wasting time. Aaron, 29.5 and 29.6. In any case, I'm here just to provide technical information on what the printed artifact can tell us. And in the first case, I'm particularly interested in what any exemplar of a book can tell us about its readers, because the audiences for these things are something we can tell by looking at the artifact. And a bibliography or a catalog like this is not just about what you have to read to stay current when you're going to write about narratives. It's an attempt to say to all of you that if you're interested in what anyone could have known in 1800, or what they could have known in 1820, this will provide you with insight into those points, whatever date you're interested in. These two editions of Equiano, in the first case, if you back down a little bit, Aaron, some of you, no, down the other way. Some of you were talking about, say, up, 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 other way, up. Oh, and I had to apologize.
It was already there, you didn't
Go up
see
to
it.
21.5. 21.5.
21.5, I thought you said 29.
29.5, you were going the wrong direction. I'm going to have to ask for 10 more minutes. Stop. Okay, now in some cases, someone talked about dirty archaeological data. 29.4 and 29.5 are almost certainly the same book, but they were entered into the ESTC by different people. Right?
That's created what could be a ghost, but could be a real variant. And the real variant means there were 300 more copies of the book probably. And those all got sold. And someone thought it was important to do it again. Now go up a little bit to 29.5 and 29.6. Okay, stop right there. Both of these include lists of subscribers. This one includes lists of Irish subscribers and a list of English subscribers. Those actually tell us who got those books, who paid for the publication. The imprint, in addition, tells us something very important about these two printers who printed Equiano. London, printed for and sold by the author, 1790. A title page is always an advertisement for three things. The work itself, the author himself, it's always an advertisement for the printer. Unless the printer doesn't want someone to know he handled it. And these two printers didn't want to be connected with Equiano. Right? It was controversial. Otherwise, they would have said right up front, this is available in my bookshop. And there was another way to tell people it was available in their bookshop, and that was to print a colophon at the back, saying it's published by this man who came and put his money in my hand before I said a word. Right? Or you could say at the back of the book, printed by this man. So then you were saying, well, I don't want my name on the title page, but I really like the business anyway, but I hope when you come to me, you're not Mr. Equiano again. Okay? In any case, those two subscription lists are going to tell you where those books went right off of that press, into which country houses and into which townhouses in Dublin itself. Let's go to plus 10-8.3, 8.4.
Control F.
I told him to shout me.
He asked me to say that.
I did. And he said that would be rude, and I said, well, it's ruder to go over. And now I'm more embarrassed than I can say. Can I go over a little bit? 10.8.3 is Capitan's Elegia reprinted in 1848. What's below it, 10.4, is a pretty darn scarce book, an African-American prosopography. It's mostly Americans, but we know, because of various textual changes in the poem, that Mr. Symonds had access in 1886-87. He had access to a copy of A-3. What library he had access to it, we don't know yet. But this book was published solely by subscription. It was aimed solely at African Americans, and the text is in many different learned languages. It's an interesting insight into readers of that particular book. Let's turn to...
I think we're going to have to
stop.
Sorry.
Thanks. Sorry.
Don't stay here. We can take a question, though. Yeah, I'll start the first question here. So could you help us understand what your definition of a narrative is? Because my perspective of someone who works on Brazil, there are lots and lots of narratives of the transatlantic trade authored by Africans, but they don't seem to appear here. They might be quite short, they might appear in print or a manuscript version, but so could you help us kind of with your definitional?
That's a big question that I deal with almost every day on this project. So there's two issues, what's a narrative and what's a published narrative. So it needs to be published one way or another before we can get it into the catalog. We're not going to be able to find all the manuscripts and all the archives of narratives. And by narrative, I'm working with the idea that there is someone, in this case born in Africa, who experienced the trade, who either himself or herself or through someone interviewing them or questioning them, tells something about their life, what has happened to them. And I need to see one way or another the African voice in there, and not another person describing what they think happened to them. And if I see that and it gets published, then it goes in the catalog. That's what I mean.
Published, does it have to, the publication is all by a printer? Could it be in a newspaper format, broadsheets?
It could be broadsides, newspapers, and many of them are.
I think I'm going to tell you from our Latin Americanist perspective, you've got a lot of materials that you might want to think about. They're going to be quite short, but they're going to be up there with your Equianos and your Phyllis Wheatley's.
I am interested in that,
Okay.
and many of them are quite short.
Yes, Keith.
Yes.
Well, the related question is about how you constitute authorship. Because, for example, a famous case of Mary Prince, writing, publishing in 1832. In what sense exactly Mary Prince is the author is a very complicated question.
For a number of these, there are complicated questions, including some very early charges of plagiarism. It's fair to say, if at any point in its publishing history, it was popularly or explicitly reputed to have been written by someone born in Africa, then that constitutes, for the period that that's in circulation, it constitutes knowledge that it was written by an African-born, formerly enslaved person. So that's roughly how we're handling it. But we are woefully behindhand in newspaper research in particular, newspaper reprinting of North American petitions and that sort of thing.
But if I recall, it's been about a year since I worked on it. I think she's born in the West Indies.
She is.
So she wouldn't be in there. You have to be born in Africa. So only people born
Yeah, but
in
I mean,
Africa.
it's the same principle.
It's the same, you're right. Exactly, yes.
Yes.
I'm curious, are you thinking about these texts also as material culture? And if you are you then going to be looking at things like marginalia and how people are interacting with these texts, or if there are accompanying letters, so someone sort of does send a manuscript letter alongside the book to a friend, which often appears side by side in private collections. How are you dealing with this in its context?
If it comes back to the criteria, if it gets published, and we do have letters in here that are connected to some other narrative, and if the letter gets printed somewhere in a newspaper or in a later edition of the book or something, then it's in here.
So what I mean is that you wouldn't look at it as in, to say I get a copy of Equiano's book and I think, that you'd be really interested in it, and I send it with a letter giving some insight into the readership as well. Would that be included?
We'd be thrilled. And that's one of the reasons to convert it from simply a book to a database, where we could envisage people sharing different forms in which the artifact has circulated. We'd love to find copies of reading notes and some things, but the first step is just giving the title, suggesting how many discrete editions in how many different forms there are to look at. I've chosen a few of them to do further research on, particularly because I've become interested. This is not my field at all. Your world is completely new to me in a sense, and I'm embarrassed how much I have to do to catch up. But I'm particularly interested in those texts that cross the Atlantic, because we can tell by textual variation. For instance, if something's printed in Massachusetts and Virginia, Massachusetts and Pennsylvania and New Jersey and New York in a chronological sequence in 1783, we can tell which one of those printings in a newspaper went to Shelburne, England, and was printed that fall. And it's of minor interest to me which port that newspaper left. Now, sometimes reprinters in newspapers say, from the Salem Star, but often they don't. So there's a particular periodical printing in 1783 in England. I'd like to know where he got that text. The text itself will tell us where.
All right, we're going to have to close this one, but thank you to both of you
Thanks
so
very
much.
Sorry for that.
Bruno?
Stick that in your pocket.
Okay, the back?
It doesn't matter, wherever is convenient for you. And this goes to your shirt. There should be fine. And then, where this one, voila.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Bruno Veras. I'm a PhD student at York University, working under Professor Paul Lovejoy. And my presentation today is about the Baquaqua project. That is a project that we are trying to work on, or I cannot say trying to finish because it's so much work. Has been five years, and I would say every 2 months we promise each other that we are going to stop researching more information about Baquaqua, and we always find something, like yesterday and today. So we're going to drive back to Canada and stop in Norwich because we heard from some of our colleagues that we can find more stuff there. But today my presentation is divided in 3 sections. I'll be very quick explaining who is Mohamed Gard Baquaqua. The website, we are not going really online, and I'll explain why I'm not going to show you the website now when I'm in the second part. And finally is the main piece of my presentation today. I'm not going to talk about a database, about historical data, but I want to talk a bit about the links and potentialities that a digital history project would have for cultural production, to our relationship with community, our relationship with cultural producers, let's say like theater producers, dancers, and so on. So the idea is to show how we talk to them, how is this conversation being done, and we can talk a little bit about methods and so on, because so yes, this is the idea for today. So Baquaqua is also in your list, I'm sure, because his book was printed in 1854, and we have lots of information around him, and every time we travel, we find more on northern Nigeria, or here in US, or in Brazil, or so on. So he was born in Jugu. I'm just going very quick with the places that we found information about him and he lived. We just heard more information from Marcelo from Rio Grande do Sul and his master, so we are also going to take notes of that and put in the book. He went to New York City in 1847, Port-au-Prince, Macroville in upstate New York, Canada West, where is today Ontario, Liverpool in UK, and we also heard some more stuff about Liverpool and England. We think we can find more information about him, and my last presentation at the ASA was about that. What happened to Baquaqua after 1857? We think he went to Liberia or to Sierra Leone, but we are still looking for more information about that. So yes, the website, baquaqua.org. I'm not going online right now to show you the website because the website is quite ugly, I have to say. Because when I arrived at York, our website was just in Portuguese. And then Lovejoy said, Bruno, this website cannot be just in Portuguese, you know? This has to be in Portuguese, in English, in French, in Hausa, in Arabic, and in Spanish. Why Spanish? Because if I don't put this in Spanish, Serena will kill me. But it's true, like the Caribbean, Spanish is a very key, important language, and he lived in the Caribbean for 3 years. So yes, so when we try to make our website like work in 6 different languages, this got a kind of mess up, but we are working a new version of the website. This is still the old version of the website with the videos and so on, but we are ready, as I said, working in a new version that's going to look neat, and all those languages are going to work, 6 languages. So yes, and our idea with the Baquaqua website is to divide it in different sections, thinking about like the public we want to reach, and our idea is to have like researchers, graduate students, professors looking at the website. So we have now our database that's not available yet with 312 entries, newspapers, the book itself, records about his master, records from the Baptist church, and so on, everything in PDF. So our idea is to make all these records available about Baquaqua, and very soon we hope we are going to finish the book and make all these records available for people to look at. We have this section with videos in Portuguese, in English, in Hausa, in US. So we recorded some videos, and Luisa was really key for that because she studied filming. to create these videos. And they are quite important for the kind of public we are going to talk in my third part of the presentation. That's the general public, school teachers, people interested in arts, and so on. So right now, I think we have maybe 9 videos, if I'm not wrong. We are working on the subtitles because we want all the videos to have subtitles. Even the videos in Portuguese, we want subtitles in Portuguese because one of our concerns, and it's something actually that we can talk about, we should talk about in everybody's project, is people with disabilities. On how those people with disabilities can access our information. So on the new website we are creating, we are worried about what's the name of the plugin that you have to install to make the images and the text readable for people who can't see, like blind people. They can listen to the information in the website. So the subtitles for the videos also has these try to fit in this concern. So yes, another section with educational materials. There is a book with activities for children with 10 and 9 years old that I also never finish. I have to finish my PhD first, and but I have the draft. So every day I look to the draft. Let's draw something new, PhD dissertation. But yes, we have this with pictures for coloring. This is already in the website, and it's beautiful when, for example, sometimes people send us images back from schools, like a teacher. So people from the project Baquaqua, we use today your pictures. Look at this, and then the children like painting Baquaqua using a brown color, a black color with the kids in Brazil. So just zooming in this picture, this is Baquaqua's family. And the interesting part is that our designer, Tatiane Lima from Bahia, a close friend, we worked a lot in these pictures because we really tried to follow, let's say, the historic information we had about Baquaqua's family, about Baquaqua's haircut, because he describes the haircut that people in Chubu would use. So this is the little Baquaqua. So everything we try to follow, except we have here a mistake that Baquaqua's sisters, no Hausa girl would use this haircut. So we are going to fix that. Lovejoy already pointed out. And this is a new project that we are working on, and we have information about haircut, hairstyles in Hausa land and everywhere in West Africa, scarifications. So we are going to incorporate this information that we are collecting for this new project for like the pictures for the kids to draw. So we are really worried as a historian, as a boring historian, annoying historian, to even the pictures that the children are going to paint about Baquaqua's life follow the historical information we have. So this is so yeah, this goes on the book for children's activities that we never finished, but we have pictures. This is a quick picture from the new website that we are building for the Baquaqua.org. Fernanda, one of his amazing assistants, she's working with that, and I hope Kartikai will be able also to help us soon. It's divided in about, studying, videos, maps. We want to have maps about Baquaqua, educational materials, the database with all the interest, and so on. And productions and media. So let's talk about these 2 points. This is the section we have to talk about the cultural productions initiatives connected to our projects. And we are working, I think right now, with 4 different producers and directors in many different medias, artistic kind of medias connected to the project. And I want to highlight some of them very quick. I have 3 minutes. And one of them is this theater performance about Baquaqua that now is in the 30th season, the city of São Paulo. Not just in the city of São Paulo, actually they are like going around the whole state of São Paulo. Many people already saw this display. There's lots of criticism and you can find online, and it's quite interesting the way, like at least the people from the theater and the dancing performance got to me. Facebook. So this is something that we also have to worry or to think about when we have a digital history project with this public history face, because it's an easier way to the general public to reach us. So Bruno, I am a producer, a theater producer, and I want to do something on Baquaqua. Okay, let's talk about it. So you have to have the logo for Freedom Narratives, you have to have the logo for SHAD, the Baquaqua's project, because Lovejoy is paying. So his project is supporting things in Brazil. And then we start to work. And then they have some crazy ideas, and then I have to convince them that this would never happen in the 19th century, and we have to negotiate, you know? And like when I work with people from theater, I get some of his assistants who work with theater, like Fernanda, or working with filming, Luisa comes with me, and they take lots of notes. Because in the end, we want to write, let's say, papers and essays about methods. And thinking about this process of as a historian, working with artists, how we negotiate, the methods we use to produce the texts, and so on. So we also think methodologically about the way we deal with art production. These are 3 other pieces under progress. This is a musical about Baquaqua, and this guy is really creative, so I'm really annoying with him. So the process is really, really interesting in Minas Gerais. This is one of my favorites. They are still producing, so they are still writing it. It's an experimental movie about Baquaqua's mother. Leticia, she was asking me, Bruno, do you think Baquaqua had a girlfriend or something like that in Hausa land who was missing him? I don't know, but if you want to write a love story about Baquaqua, the person he loved more was his mother. So this is going to be a movie about Baquaqua and his mother in a very experimental way. And they use the materials you have in the website, all the videos, all the texts, all the educational information, all the information we have in Facebook and so on. So yes, like we have all the concerns about the database, how we create do the curation of our data, the technical side, but we also want to create like ways to reach people, and this general public also to reach us. This is why we are concerned about the media, Instagram and Facebook, an easy way to find information about us. And so yes, I think we have been quite lucky to work with a very talented people. In the process of doing that as a historian and an annoying person, it's been quite interesting, I would say. So this is the Baquaqua project. Thank you.
Oh yes. Thank you, Bruno. Some questions for Bruno.
I like how you brought in the creative processes around there. I was thinking about Anna Fields Black, who just did an operetta called Requiem for Rice. That's Erin. So, and she said about engaging multiple publics. So, how do you see this project engaging the various multiple projects, from children to the elderly to visual to auditory, and why does that matter for public-facing projects like ourselves? So we should consider that type of engagement.
I would say that maybe each product that I showcase here, they have a different public. So like the theater, I would say that's more related to children. So right now they are moving around São Paulo in different public libraries, and they are performing the play there. The dancer, he used to perform in very, how can I say, very strange, at least for me as a story, very strange places, just with people from like arts and so on, very, very interesting spaces, but not with children. So I think like each of these cultural productions, they have a different public. And it's not my intention to try to limit or try to find just people working with children, because now I want to work with children, but it depends on their proposal to meet, to work together, we find a way to reach different publics.
How have you found that each of these different kinds of cultural producers access, some of the work that takes place here, database-driven slave studies? Is that important for them? Do you see that represented in any of these kind of cultural productions, or are these kind of really a different kind of language, different set of knowledge, information comes from a different way?
No, I think they. How can I answer with other examples? So a couple of days ago, I was talking with a friend, and he's a writer. He writes for movies and series, and he was planning to write to write a script for a series about a woman in Canada who was from the Caribbean, and then she starts to realize she has kind of powers because her mother was what's the name of the African religions in Jamaica? She was Obia. She was a Obia woman. Da, da, da. So let's think about what was happening in West Africa in this time. Da, 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 da. How can we connect historical information to what you are trying to do? That's quite crazy, but you can find historical information to I don't know, to make your argument more interesting. So I told him to go to slave voyages to look at the ethnicities and the ships and so on, and he was doing that, and he found lots of information about the ships, from where the ships came from to Jamaica and so, and then he started to research more precisely about religion in these parts of Africa. So this is one of the examples I can tell you out of the Baquaqua project, but I think it's quite important for people to know about these projects, social media, because like everybody has social media, but it's not everybody who has this idea to go on Google and look for a database. But sometimes when they are on Facebook, they like a page, let's say Black History in Brazil, and someone in this page, Black History in Brazil, posted something about a very specific database. And then, oh, there is something here. So from page to page, they can find information about those databases that we are talking about here. But I don't think they would find that by themselves, like just going on Google and find information about Marronnage or so on, as one of the examples. I think social media is something very key for the general public discover our work, and a way for us to also to showcase our what we are doing in this technical and detailed way.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Just in a second, we'll have Luisa.
Thank you, Bruno, for this very inspiring presentation. I'm Luisa Cruz. I'm a digital research assistant for Professor Paul, and I also work with Bruno at the Heritaman Institute. And I'm going to talk about the Freedom Narratives project, and I'm going to give a brief overview of its current stages in terms of research. So for those of you who don't know, the Freedom Narratives project is one of the partner projects of the Enslaved Hub, and it's directed by Professor Lovejoy, Erica Delgado, who's not here, she's our associate director, and Bruno is our project manager. The Freedom Narratives online database focuses on the enforced migration of Atlantic Africans through an examination of biographical accounts of individuals born in West Africa who were enslaved from the 16th to the 19th century. The focus is on testimony, the voices of individual Africans. The project uses an online digital repository of autobiographical testimonies and biographical data of Atlantic Africans to analyze patterns in the slave trade from West Africa, specifically in terms of where individuals came from, why they were enslaved, and what happened to them. Freedom Narratives focuses on the people born in Africa and hence, in most cases, had been born free, rather than on those who were born into slavery in the Americas or elsewhere. The individuals in this repository include those who traveled within West Africa as well as those who experienced the Middle Passage. Sometimes these accounts are referred to as slave narratives, but in our estimation, such testimonies more accurately reflect freedom narratives, because in most cases, individuals were born free and subsequently regained their freedom. So we basically aim to go beyond narratives of enslavement and think and talk about what other aspects of their lives could be as important as like the fact that these people were enslaved. So Freedom Narratives enables an examination of biographical testimonies as the fundamental unit of analysis, whether the primary texts arise from first-person memory or survive via handwritten texts. Original testimonies are supplemented with biographical details from culled from legal, ecclesiastical, and other types of records whenever possible. So throughout this presentation, I'll run through our website, our methodology, and a couple of examples. And just as a brief note, as Bruno beautifully said in his presentation, like social media is a big thing for us at the Heritaman Institute. So we have a Facebook and an Instagram page that we just launched, I think, last month. So it's pretty new, but if you have one account of these social media, you can definitely give it a follow. So this is a screenshot of our website, freedomnarratives.org. It's live, but it's under construction and under revision. There's still like even some facts that are not exactly precise. So this is like a prototype. And see like 2,000 testimonies, this is not true, this is to create some hype. Because right now I think we have currently around 100 people in there. But it's like our aim for like at least this year. And one thing that we also like doing is more to attract the attention of viewers is we feature profiles that have significantly more resources available for them. So to catch the attention. And, oh, sorry. So we are a database working under Core on a MySQL server backend. Freedom Narratives uses biographies and autobiographies as our main sources. And the project has a goal of creating timelines and therefore biographical histories of folk who didn't have their personal info recorded with that intent. Those biographical histories are built by the researchers and based on very diversified sources, such as registers, slave ads, scape ads, which can also be complemented by secondary sources. So we don't really, we also bring those into consideration for our, for backupping our own research. So basically the whole project focuses on the life events of enslaved people. That's how we want to create the narrative. And the way that we translate that into our computer science methodology is through, in order to bring those narrative aspects and human flows to these spreadsheets and databases, we sort of divide it by a name of the person, so the person entry that is related to an event. So we list the events that happen in that person's life, as many as we find, and those events are also connected to a place. So when we know who the person is, so basic info about the person, the events that person went through, and the places when that is from, when you create that sentence, we're also available to, we're also enabled, we can also put in a database that could create a timeline for us. So this is how I want to present the project. Now, yeah, more specifically on methodology. So yeah, it's a very slow process. We are writing biographies in the process of research, basically, and the collaborators are entering their own data. So we have people like Thomas Garris that he's contributing with his own platform and his own sources. So we sort of have to respect the time that these other collaborators have, and to create sort of a middle ground between all of them. So that also creates a lot of time and a lot of trial and error. And I think that we are in a point that we sort of are arriving in that middle ground, and the project has been going at a steady pace for the last couple of months. And this is an open-ended database, and of course it's open to change from other collaborators too. And regarding sources, we basically breaking them down is what I'm spending a lot of my own time on. As mentioned before, we're dealing with very different types of sources. So that we call object for the project. And after much trial and error, we got into a consensus and to reach our best way to keep track and correlate those different types of sources. So this is a snapshot of our database. This is just like the first third of it. So I want to make a highlight on this column here, is the description one, because all of the other entries and columns are very straightforward and a basic translation from what the source says. But I really like the idea of the description one because it allows the researcher or the research assistant to write its own interpretation of the narrative found in the source. So you're able to really study the source and delve into it and see what it would bring to the project within that goal of constructing a narrative. And of course, we have this protocol of going through two sets of eyes for everything. So we make sure that this kind of subjective description is also factual. And this is our front end way of showing our sources. And I really like this method. because we crop and highlight our sources, and are really highlighting because when we highlight specific events found regarding an individual's life, we still show the partial context of the full source that it was displayed in. And this would also link to the full source that would be available in the website. But this as a snapshot, like especially when it's a periodical or journal or newspaper, you're able to see what other things were of interest of the newspaper publishers of the time, and you're able to see those chronological and contexts. Now I'm going to controlled vocabulary. Many of our naming practices are defined by matrix, but some we create our own due to specificities of our own project and the different types of sources we encounter. So one example is our definition of regions, because we are focusing on West Africans, so we have to define what West Africa is, and this stems from Lovejoy's research. So we have geographical delimitations instead of political ones due to the permanent quality of these spaces in comparison to political boundaries that change over time and throughout the context of our research. And so our definition of West Africa is Western Savannah, I don't know if you can read it, Western Savannah, Central Savannah, Senegambia, Upper Guinea Coast, forests of West Africa, Voltaic region, Bight of Benin, and Bight of Biafra. So we aim to get individuals that were mostly born within that sphere. This is our other controlled vocabulary spreadsheet on ethnonym and language. And I just wanted to mention that we are also creating a separate database with the help of ethnologue.com to get not only the ethnonyms but also variations of it and stuff like that. So now we're going to the three main spreadsheets that are person, event, and place. Person, event. Yeah, person and event. We talked about place. So regarding the person, of course, we have the name. I didn't put it there. And we have also alternative spellings. We just don't want to go with the name that it was supposed to be there. Region of origin, gender, physical characteristics like scarifications, body marks, relationship types like kinship, ownership. That's a big thing within our website that we're going to show. I'm almost running out of time. Event, we are talking about an occurrence in somebody's life which changes the following statuses. So the event type would be anything like a birth, marriage, enslavement, liberation, all of those clearly defined items that are also part of our controlled vocabulary. I'm going to run through this really quickly. I just want to mention, too, that religion, we consider it as an event because it can change over time, especially within the Baptist missionaries that came to Africa and all that stuff. And also the date, that we put year when you're sure about the year, and circa year when we can sort of estimate based on basic math that we do when reading the dates, when was a person born and stuff, but we can't really, it's an estimated guess that we're doing, basically. So now, I'm actually going to the website just to show, oops, yes. Just to show a couple of examples that really interest me. And one thing that I really like about them is the kinship relationship that we can establish with that database. For example, if we go to Maria Luisa. Oops, so this is our template of a timeline, and here are two events that we don't have a defined date for them. And repeating, we have some problems regarding some fact checking that we still need to do, but this is just a prototype. So we go through a timeline and we're able to scroll through the events that happens in that person's life. So for example, this was a big year for her: disembarkation, selling, and re-enslavement. And we have a description of the place. We plan to replace it with maps later on. Person metadata, here we have the sources that for some reason is not appearing. And with the related records, we have Manuel that also appears here. Oops. That happens to be her husband. So we can actually click on his profile. And this could be also very, just in closing, very important when talking about people that are within that the same slave ship, for example. We can have a list of everybody that was within that same space in that same event. Yeah, thank you.
Some questions for Luisa? Yes.
Hi. So I'm not very familiar with the history aspects of it, but I come at this from a data modeling perspective. And of particular interest to me is the notion of region. Is that frozen in time for you guys? Because as in other projects that I've worked on, the notion of a place changes, especially with respect to language, right? You say, I'm from this place, but boundaries change sociopolitically, right, or economically. Like, so are those regions that you defined over the continent, are they static? Does your controlled vocabulary have anything to do with temporality?
I think, Paul, you should be good in answering this too, because I'm not a historian myself either.
Well, in all cases, the very specific places are also included, so they define those. And you're absolutely right, regions don't stay the same. Our problem was attempting to account for the movement of people within West Africa after we never moved West Africa. And so that we needed some kind of regionalization not related to modern country boundaries, but related much more to ecological river systems or those kinds of things, which in a certain kind of way don't change that much over the period of time that we're dealing with. These are our recognitions. So we've avoided any names that have an equivalent either in colonial context or modern country context. So you'll be able to search and do all kinds of things that are just based on the names of places whenever we have that information.
And as more specified as the places, so it can be a country, but it can also be a city, a street name. If we have a street name, for example, we can actually map it and put a pin on it on something that we're still working on. So our idea is the more specific we have the information, the better.
Yes. Yes.
Mine is a small question. Your category of status, and you example enslaved or free. And so my question is, do you also account for self-liberation?
Self-liberation? Yeah, we have escape as an event. So if a person, a part of their lives escaped, we have that there. But then the following, like the aftermath of that event would be also cited as either liberation or re-enslavement.
Some more questions. All right, Luisa, thank you so much. We're going to move right forward. Jorge, are you ready to go?
We can take a 5-minute break.
We can take a 5-minute break?
Yeah,
okay,
yes.
5-minute break. Quick break.
Yeah.
And then Jorge and Beth.